Hey everyone, this is Mario again, coming at you with another movie review. Today, I'm reviewing a film from the early 80s, which is now 31 years old almost. It is a movie that when it came out, not that many people liked it. I mean, there was a couple things about the movie, like the performance of the villain, and then maybe one or two other things that some critics said were good, but for the most part, this movie was hated. And I believe it might have been a flop at the box office. Yep, it was a flop. Just barely it was a flop, because it was a couple $1,000,000 off from breaking even. And like another flop from the later 80s, its soundtrack is done by Queen, although entirely this time. It is the Dino De Laurentiis, Dino De Laurentiis produced movie Flash Gordon. Flash! Savior of the universe. I know that sounds bad, but everyone knows that from the opening theme of this movie. Pathetic Earthlings, who can save you now? Yeah, that's the tagline of this movie. Yeah. Now, the production history of this movie is actually kind of interesting because you all know that this is based on the old serials of Flash Gordon, which I've never seen, but I hear they're kind of good for camp value or something. But ironically, they're one of the things that inspired George Lucas. And also, if it wasn't for Dino De Laurentiis making this movie, Lucas, was actually going to make a Flash Gordon movie of his own. But since the rights were in the Lucas' hand, he created Star Wars. So I guess you could say without this movie, we would not have Star Wars. We might, but it might be a hell of a lot different. So even if you hate this movie, praise it for because of that. We don't want to have Star Wars. Now the plot of the movie is that the evil Emperor Ming the Merciless, he basically is bored, as he puts in the opening scene. Clytus, I'm bored. What plaything can you offer me today? An obscure body in the SK system, Your Majesty. The inhabitants refer to it as the planet Earth. How peaceful it looks. Most effective, Your Majesty. Will you destroy this Earth? Later. I'd like to play with things a while before annihilation. I don't think it, but basically Ming is causing havoc on Earth. And only one person on the entire planet thinks that these things are not normal, and that is former NASA scientist Dr. Hans Zarkov, played by Chaim Topol, if I'm pronouncing his name correctly. Now, of course, he wants to go out in space and check it. In one way, he has a space shuttle, which I could guess that's one of the things where logic you like. I know he used to work at NASA, but how the hell did he get his hands on the technology to make a fully functional spaceship? I mean, was he like walking around the office going, oh, they're not going to miss that. They're not going to miss that. They're not going to miss that. Ooh, rocket thruster. They're not going to miss this. Hey, Hans, what's that you got? I have nothing. Is that how he did it? Or is it held together with chewing gum and paper clips? I wouldn't write in it. I don't blame his assistant for running out on him. Well, just so happens a plane crashes nearby, and on it board are the star quarterback of the New York Jets, Flash Gordon, played by Sam Jones, and a traveling journalist named Dale Arden, played by Melody Anderson. Well, because of a couple things, Hans gets them on board the ship, and he's on there as well, and they go off into space. Well, they crash on this planet, where it happens to be where Ming is, and they are taken in front of him. Well, as you can guess, Ming does not like Earthlings, but he is enticed by Dale and tries to seduce her. And because of that, Flash, being the hero that he is, he gets in a fight. And then from there, everything goes on. From that, we can see Flash is going to be Ming's arch enemy, Dale is going to be the center of his affection, and Hans is going to happen whatever happens to him. And of course, this starts a whole revolution which carries on through the rest of the movie. Now, the Queen's score, probably one of my favorite bits of it is during the scene where Flash tries to stop Ming from seducing Dale. And it's just very good guitar work. Now, 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 now. And then of course, just the dialogue during that scene is funny. Clytus, are your men on the right pills? Apparently not. Yeah, they're on the like. No, Your Majesty, they're not on those pills. These pills are LSD. I don't know what that is. You idiot, Clytus. They're high, that's why they're losing. The stormtroopers can do better than that. Your Majesty, who are the stormtroopers? I don't know, but apparently they're better than those morons, even though they can't hit the broadside of a bomb. I can imagine him saying that, but it's a good piece of music. I mean, the whole soundtrack is great, but that's just my favorite track on it. I can imagine that being like a boss battle theme in a video game. Like, if they made a video game of this nowadays, I'd love to see that during one of the boss battles. Like, that's one thing that popped in my head when I was listening to it once in a while. Like, boss battle music, cool. Now, people say the costumes are outlandish, but it's based off a cereal from the 30s, 40s, or wherever it came from. I would expect the costumes to be a little outlandish when they're updated. And the Hawkman wings in the flying sequences, they're done beautifully for the early 80s. And then, of course, the rocket cycle sequences and those laser fights, those are done. Not as good as Star Wars, obviously, because those people probably a little bit more experienced and stuff like this, but it's still done creatively. Then, of course, the acting, at times there's over the top, like, let me find the name of the guy who plays the lead Hawkman. Voltan, Brian Blessed, he just has that booming voice, and when he says his stuff, sometimes he says it over the top, like that thing, Gordon's alive? It just sounds over the top and stuff. And of course, he went on to be Robin Hood's father in Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves, even though he's not in the movie that long, but that's the only other role I know him from. And then the actor that plays Prince Baron, Timothy Dalton, he does a pretty good job as well. Now, if there's one thing that they added into this movie that's not in the series, from what I understand, is the introduction of Clytus, who in this movie is played by Peter Wingard, which kind of looks familiar, but I can't place him. I'm checking to see what else he played real quick. Oh, man. It says here that he was also a musician. If I'm reading this right, he's retired, at least from acting. He was in the Memoirs of Sherlock Holmes. He was in something with Raymond Burr. I don't really recognize much of this stuff, but he does a pretty good job in this movie, even though we don't see his face. And he's just he is such a memorable secondary villain that when he gets his comeuppance, you really like it. Because even though you don't see his face, he just has that snide thing. I mean, even how he says the word Earth at the beginning, you can tell that he's revolted by the name of the planet alone. That the fact that if he went there, he'd be so snobbish. He'd probably be acting like how most people view a stereotypical English person. He'd be like, "What is this?" You know, sticking the nose up at people. Snobbish. Like if you fuse a stereotypical English person with a stereotypical Connecticut person, you know, upper crusty, I guess you could put it. He's like that. Then again, he's Ming's second in command, and Ming is supposed to be the most powerful man in the universe. You can expect him to be like that. Speaking of Ming, Max von Sydow does a perfect job as Ming. I mean, he has that voice. He has the perfect voice to play a villain, and just the way he says his lines. Like at the first time you hear his voice, the way he says "bored." You can tell from that alone that he's going to be a good villain. And I'm actually happy that he's one of the few things about this movie that critics praise. And whenever you see him throughout the movie, just the way he carries himself, he's a very good villain. I don't know if Van Sydow did any other villain roles, but he should have. I mean, he's still around. He should do voice work as villains. That would be cool. I mean, I can imagine him voicing Madara for some reason in the English dub of Naruto when they actually get to him using his real voice. I can imagine that voice coming out from behind that mask. I can just imagine him as like, "Sasuke, you had to know it'd be true. That's Van Sydow?" "Yes, Sasuke. What the hell are you doing in this anime?" Just He just has that voice. Then again, I'm not saying he's not bad at playing good guys as well. I mean, he's a guy that played Father Merrin in The Exorcist. It's just he has a voice that he's good at doing anyone. It's just for villains, especially in this movie, it's just he just did a very good job. Now Sam Jones, in the movie, the only performance we really see from him is physical because he had disagreements with the director and of course with De Laurentiis, excuse me, DeLucas, Star Wars on the mind, but because of those disagreements, when it came to them doing dubbing and post-production, he walked off the set. So that killed the prospect of a sequel right away, even though the ending does lead up to a sequel, which it doesn't bother me. I guess you can figure it out in mind is like, did they actually get away? Or is it someone else picking up his ring? It just makes you wonder. I guess you could say, I guess like how Stephen King puts it sometimes, the unanswered question stays with you go on. I mean, the unanswered question stays with you go on. Anyway, my final thoughts on the movie. It's a good movie from the 80s. The camp value for me actually works. The acting is pretty good, especially by the villains. The hero, the guy does a good job, but it's probably because it's not his real voice that might kill it, but I've never really heard his real voice, so it doesn't bother me. The score by Queen is good, even though I prefer their music for Highlander for the most part, but it's still a good score. My rating for the movie, I'd give it 3.5 out of 5 stars. I would recommend it if you like science fiction movies, you haven't seen it, and you like movies with some camp value, I'd say give it a watch. It's probably right up your alley.